At 1:52 in the morning, a convoy leaves the Iranian frontier without headlights. The vehicles do not travel together. One truck moves first. A second follows 20 minutes later. Then a civilian fuel tanker. Then a covered transporter carrying something too long, too heavy, and too carefully protected to be ordinary cargo. The convoy crosses into Iraq through a route where mountains, valleys, villages, and commercial traffic create natural concealment. Its paperwork describes industrial machinery. Its drivers carry civilian identification. Its escort vehicles display no Iranian military markings. By sunrise, the trucks have disappeared into the Zagros foothills. A satellite passes overhead and sees an empty road. Several hours later, one vehicle emerges from a tunnel without the cargo it carried inside. Nothing has been launched, no missile has been displayed, no public announcement has been made, but if that transporter entered a functioning underground depot, Iran may have achieved something strategically more important than firing a weapon. It may have moved part of its retaliatory capability beyond Iran's borders. This is the scenario behind growing concern that Tehran could use Iraqi territory as strategic depth for missiles, drones, launchers, spare parts, and command infrastructure. The dramatic version of the story claims Iran is moving its most important ballistic weapons into Iraq's deepest mountain, caves. That claim remains unproven. There is no publicly verified satellite record showing Iran's strategic missile force relocating wholesale into a hidden network beneath Iraqi Kurdistan. There is no confirmed inventory of Iranian launchers inside Zagros caves. There is no public map identifying vast Iranian-controlled subterranean missile cities beneath Iraqi territory. But the absence of proof does not make the underlying strategy impossible. Several pieces of the architecture already exist. Iran has developed extensive underground missile infrastructure inside its own territory. It has transferred missile technology and weapons to allied movements throughout the region. Iran-backed factions in Iraq control armed forces, bases, political networks, transportation routes, and arsenals that extend beyond the authority of ordinary civilian institutions. And Iraq's rugged geography offers places where weapons could be dispersed, concealed, assembled, maintained, or temporarily stored. The real question is therefore not whether every part of the sensational claim has been confirmed. The question is why Tehran would want this capability, what evidence indicates it has moved in this direction before, and how an underground Iraqi network would alter the military balance. The public trail begins years before the current confrontation. In 2018, Iranian, Iraqi, and Western sources told Reuters that Iran had transferred several dozen short-range ballistic missiles to allied Shiite factions in Iraq and was helping some groups develop the ability to manufacture missiles locally. The reported systems included the Zelzal, Fateh 110, and Zulfiqar families, with ranges that could threaten targets well beyond Iraq. The reported production locations were not described as mysterious caves in the deepest Zagros range. They included areas such as Al-Zafaraniya near Baghdad and Jurf al-Sakr south of the capital, while one source also referred to activity in Iraqi Kurdistan. Iran and Iraq declined to confirm important portions of the report, but the United States publicly described the missile transfer allegations as credible. This distinction matters. The documented concern was never limited to Iran hiding complete missiles in one remote tunnel. It involved a distributed system. Finished missiles could cross the border. Components could be transported separately. Iraqi personnel could receive training in Iran. Workshops could assemble or modify weapons locally. Launchers could remain hidden away from the missiles until required. Guidance systems, warheads, propellant equipment, communications gear, and maintenance tools could move through different channels. A satellite looking for one enormous convoy might see nothing decisive because the capability was being divided into smaller pieces. That approach reflects Iran's broader regional method. Tehran rarely depends entirely on deploying conventional Iranian formations under Iranian flags. It builds relationships with allied armed groups. It transfers technology. It trains personnel. It develops local production. It creates redundant supply routes. It gives partners enough capability to act independently while preserving Iranian influence over strategic decisions. The result is a network that is harder to destroy than one centralized military expedition. A factory can be struck. Another workshop may remain. One commander can be killed. Another organization continues operating. A missile shipment can be intercepted. Local production replaces part of the loss. Strategic depth is created through dispersion rather than formal occupation. Iran's underground infrastructure at home provides the model. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has released footage of what it calls missile cities. Large tunnel complexes containing ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, drones, transporter launchers, and support equipment. The exact locations, dimensions, and inventories remain classified, and official presentations are designed partly for deterrence and propaganda. But the existence of substantial underground Iranian military facilities is not seriously disputed. Iran has repeatedly shown missiles stored along reinforced tunnel corridors and has emphasized that these complexes are intended to preserve retaliatory capability against air attack. The logic is straightforward. A missile positioned in an exposed depot can be photographed. A launcher parked in the open can be tracked. A production building can be placed on a target list. A tunnel introduces uncertainty. Analysts may identify the entrance but not know what lies behind it. The complex may contain one storage chamber or dozens. It may have a second exit. Launchers may move between interconnected sections. Missiles may remain deep inside until shortly before firing. Surface structures can be destroyed while important equipment survives underground. The attacker therefore needs repeated surveillance, specialized weapons, and reliable intelligence about internal geometry. Iran learned that fixed, invisible assets invite preemptive attack. Its response was to place an increasing share of its most important systems beneath mountains. Moving portions of that architecture into Iraq would extend the same survival strategy across an international border. The first advantage would be geographical dispersion. If every important missile remains inside Iran, an enemy can focus reconnaissance and strike planning on Iranian territory. Moving launchers, components, or reserve weapons into Iraq forces the attacker to monitor a second country. Additional roads must be watched. Additional airspace becomes relevant. More intelligence agencies must cooperate. More political permissions may be required. A target may sit close to a town, Kurdish position, Iraqi army installation, oil facility, or militia base. The military problem becomes inseparable from Iraqi sovereignty. This is the protective value of foreign territory. Concrete and rock provide physical cover. International borders provide political cover. The second advantage would be a forward operating position. Western Iran already lies close to Iraq, but assets positioned farther west could shorten the distance to targets in Israel, Jordan, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, or American facilities inside the region. The exact advantage depends on missile range and deployment location. A long-range Iranian missile does not need Iraq to reach many regional targets, but shorter-range weapons launched from Iraq could threaten locations that would otherwise require a larger and more expensive system. Drones could fly shorter routes. Cruise missiles could approach from less expected directions. Launch crews could exploit terrain and civilian traffic to relocate. A distributed Iraqi launch network would force air defense planners to watch additional threat axes instead of concentrating only on launches originating inside Iran. The third advantage would be ambiguity. If a missile rises from Iran, attribution is relatively clear. If a drone or rocket launches from Iraqi territory controlled by an armed faction, Tehran can attempt to distance itself from the decision. The militia may claim responsibility. Iran may deny direct control. The Iraqi government may say it did not authorize the attack. American or Israeli leaders must then decide whether to strike the launch site, the militia, Iranian advisors, or Iran itself. Every option carries a different escalation risk. That uncertainty can delay retaliation or divide international support. Iran's regional network has long benefited from this space between direct state action and complete independence. The fourth advantage would be survivability after an attack on Iran. A missile force is valuable only if the enemy believes part of it will survive long enough to retaliate. Moving reserve. Equipment into another country creates a strategic backup. Even if Iranian depots are damaged, Iraqi storage sites could preserve launchers, components, drones, or replacement missiles. The network would function like a military insurance policy. The purpose would not necessarily be to launch from Iraq during ordinary conditions. The assets could remain inactive until Iran's domestic force faced severe degradation. That is the logic one Iranian official reportedly described in 2018 when explaining the transfer of missiles to Iraqi allies as a backup plan in case Iran was attacked. But the geography must be understood accurately. The Zagros Mountains are not one continuous empty fortress. The range stretches across western Iran and into northeastern Iraq and southeastern Turkey. Northern Iraq includes steep folded mountains, limestone formations, valleys, caves, rock shelters, roads, villages, water systems, archaeological sites, farms, and major population centers. Scientific surveys have documented karst landscapes and natural caves formed in limestone across sections of the northwestern Zagros. Some explored caves extend hundreds of meters. But the existence of natural caverns does not mean those spaces can automatically store ballistic missiles. A natural cave may be narrow, its floor may be uneven, water may enter during rain, humidity can damage equipment, the rock may be unstable, the entrance may be too small for a transporter launcher. A large missile cannot simply be pushed into an ancient cavern and forgotten. Strategic storage requires engineering. The entrance needs to support heavy vehicles. The floor must carry enormous loads. The tunnel requires lighting, drainage, ventilation, communications, power, security, and fire suppression. Missiles need inspection, vehicles need fuel and maintenance. Sensitive electronics must be protected from moisture, dust, heat, and vibration. Propellants and warheads create safety risks. Personnel need space to operate without causing an accident that destroys the entire facility. A functioning missile depot would therefore leave signatures even if the weapons themselves remained hidden. Roads might be widened, rock would be excavated, spoil piles would appear, electrical lines or generators would be required, concrete portals could be constructed, security posts might control access, heavy trucks would visit repeatedly, communication activity could increase, workers, guards, engineers, and supplies would move through nearby communities. The cave hides what is inside. It does not erase everything required to keep the interior functioning. This is where the phrase bypassing satellite tracking becomes misleading. Mountains can obstruct observation. They cannot make logistics invisible. Modern surveillance does not depend only on photographing a missile. Analysts study change. A quiet mountainside receives a new road. A tunnel entrance gains a reinforced portal. Excavated material appears in a nearby valley. Civilian trucks begin arriving at night. Power generation increases. Security fencing expands. Vegetation is removed. New buildings appear. Vehicles follow repeated patterns. Communications connect the location to militia headquarters. Each observation may have an innocent explanation. Together, they can reveal a military project before the first missile arrives. Synthetic aperture radar satellites can observe terrain at night and through many cloud conditions. Optical systems provide detailed images when weather permits. Infrared sensors may detect vehicles, generators, or disturbed ground under suitable conditions. Signals intelligence can identify radios and mobile devices. Human sources can describe construction. Cyber operations can expose procurement and payment records. Commercial satellite companies ensure that imagery is no longer controlled only by governments. The challenge is not that caves defeat surveillance. The challenge is determining which cave matters among thousands of legitimate roads, mines, warehouses, tunnels, farms, and construction sites. Deception would become central. A militia could build false entrances. Trucks could enter empty tunnels. Construction could be disguised as mining or water infrastructure. Equipment could be moved only during weather conditions that complicate imagery. Civilian vehicles could carry components. A missile could be divided into sections. Launchers could remain in one province while missiles were stored in another. Command equipment could operate from a city. The actual firing position could be prepared only hours before launch. The goal would not be perfect invisibility. It would be to force the opponent to divide attention among too many possibilities. Iraq offers one additional advantage that Iran cannot reproduce inside its own borders. Its political system is fragmented. The federal government controls some forces and territory. The Kurdistan regional government administers much of the northeast. The popular mobilization forces include numerous formations, with different loyalties and relationships to Baghdad. Local parties, tribal structures, security agencies, militias, and economic networks exercise influence across different regions. An Iranian-linked project could exploit gaps between institutions. One authority might approve a warehouse without understanding its final use. Another might know but remain politically unwilling to interfere. A militia could place equipment within a facility officially belonging to an Iraqi security formation. The Iranian role could be limited to advisors, financing, components, and technical knowledge. This fragmentation creates concealment through bureaucracy. It also creates danger for Tehran. The more people involved, the more opportunities for exposure. A driver can talk, a contractor can photograph construction, a political rival can leak coordinates, a Kurdish intelligence service can monitor suspicious traffic, the Iraqi government can change policy, a militia commander can defect, an American aircraft can follow the wrong truck and still discover something important. Iran would be placing strategic assets inside a country whose politics it influences, but does not fully control. That is not the same as placing them beneath Iranian mountains guarded entirely by the IRGC. The location? Question creates an even larger complication. Many of Iraq's most powerful Iran-aligned factions have historically been strongest around Baghdad, southern Iraq, border corridors, and locations such as Jurf al-Sakhr. The deepest Iraqi Zagros terrain lies largely within or near the Kurdistan region, where political and security conditions differ. Moving Iranian strategic hardware into those mountains could require cooperation, coercion, covert transit, or the establishment of new local relationships. It might place equipment closer to Kurdish forces and intelligence services that have complicated relations with Tehran-backed militias. A cave may provide excellent physical protection while creating a dangerous political exposure. For that reason, the most plausible underground network might not consist of dramatic natural caves in the highest mountains. It could involve purpose-built tunnels beneath lower ridges, converted quarries, reinforced warehouses, underground sections of existing militia bases, storage chambers near border routes, industrial sites with concealed entrances, facilities hidden beneath ordinary-looking compounds. The military value comes from overhead cover, controlled access, and distribution, not from selecting the most spectacular cave on a map. The phrase, strategic military assets, also requires caution. Moving Iran's largest and most sensitive ballistic missiles into Iraq would be difficult. Long missiles require specialized transport. Large transporter erector launchers are hard to hide on narrow mountain roads. Liquid-fueled systems need extensive support. Warheads require secure handling. Iran would risk losing technology if Iraqi factions, hostile intelligence services, or local authorities gained access. A captured guidance unit could reveal important information. A damaged missile could expose materials and design features. A complete strategic system creates an enormous intelligence prize. Tehran may therefore prefer to move smaller, more replaceable assets. Short-range ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, one-way attack drones, guidance kits, solid-fuel rocket components, warhead sections, mobile launch rails, communication equipment, navigation systems, production machinery, electronic warfare tools, spare parts, or the knowledge required for Iraqi groups to manufacture simplified weapons locally. This would achieve many of the same strategic effects without risking the most sensitive elements of Iran's national arsenal. Local production is especially important. A missile hidden in a tunnel can eventually be destroyed or used. A workshop hidden underground can continue producing replacements. The machinery may be easier to conceal than finished weapons. Motors, airframes, control surfaces, fuel ingredients, and electronics can arrive separately. Civilian equipment can support military manufacturing. A facility can repair drones one month and assemble rockets the next. The line between depot and factory becomes blurred. The network gains identified launcher during an attack. Iran can exploit that hesitation. This does not mean underground facilities negate precision strikes. They change what precision strikes must achieve. A weapon does not need to penetrate the deepest chamber to disrupt the complex. The attacker can strike entrances, collapse access tunnels, destroy ventilation, cut electricity, crater approach roads, target communications, attack vehicles as they emerge, strike personnel and support buildings, repeat the attack when repairs begin. A tunnel may preserve the missiles while preventing them from leaving. That still creates a temporary military effect. The defender can excavate another entrance. The attacker can return. The result becomes a contest between destruction and recovery. Deep underground storage is strongest against one brief strike. It is less secure against persistent surveillance combined with repeated attacks. Once the entrance is known, every repair vehicle becomes observable. Every excavation team reveals where access is being restored. Every attempt to move equipment creates another targeting opportunity. The mountain protects the interior. It can also trap the inventory. Iranian planners understand this and would likely seek multiple entrances, separate chambers, mobile launch locations, and decoy portals. A successful network would avoid placing every asset behind one tunnel mouth. Weapons could move through internal corridors. Launchers could use concealed exits. Some tunnels could store equipment. Others could serve only as deception. The system's strength would come from uncertainty about its scale and connectivity. An attacker may destroy 3 entrances without knowing whether the complex has a 4th. Yet constructing that architecture inside Iraq would require years of work, large amounts of money, specialized engineering, and protection from Iraqi scrutiny. It could not be created overnight by parking trucks inside a natural cave. The greatest protection would remain political complexity. A strike inside Iran is clearly an attack on Iran. A strike on an Iranian-linked depot inside Iraq is also an attack on Iraqi territory. Baghdad may oppose both the foreign weapons and the foreign strike. The Iraqi government can find itself trapped between actors stronger than its ability to control events. If it confronts the militia, it risks internal conflict. If it ignores the facility, it appears unable to defend sovereignty. If the United States or Israel strikes without Iraqi approval, public anger can strengthen the same factions the attack was intended to weaken. If Baghdad publicly confirms the site, it must explain how foreign strategic weapons entered the country. Iran gains strategic depth partly by transferring the escalation burden to Iraq. Recent conflict has demonstrated how quickly this burden can become real. Iran-backed Iraqi factions have maintained arsenals that include missiles and drones, and they have repeatedly claimed attacks against American and Israeli interests. Reuters reported in 2025 that several powerful factions were considering disarmament or political transformation under pressure, while Iraqi security officials described the broader militia network as possessing long-range missiles and anti-aircraft weapons. Those discussions did not establish that the arsenals disappeared. They revealed the scale of the military capability operating alongside the Iraqi state. During the expanded regional war in 2026, Reuters reported that Iraqi armed factions increased missile and drone operations, while Saudi aircraft struck sites linked to Tehran-backed groups inside Iraq after attacks threatened Gulf states. Those events showed that Iraqi territory had already become part of a wider regional strike network, even without confirmation of strategic Iranian missiles hidden in Zagros caves. This is the escalation trap Tehran could exploit. Weapons operate from Iraq. Another state retaliates inside Iraq. Iraqi factions respond. Baghdad protests the violation of sovereignty. Iran claims it was not directly involved. The United States pressures the Iraqi government. Militia leaders use the strikes to recruit supporters. A military effort intended to reduce the Iranian threat can deepen Iranian political influence. The underground facility becomes more than a storage site. It becomes an escalation mechanism. The challenge for Iran is command and control. A strategic weapon must remain responsive to political leadership. If Tehran stores missiles with Iraqi allies, who controls the launch codes? Who authorizes movement? Who installs targeting data? Can an Iraqi commander fire without Iranian approval? Can Iran prevent unauthorized use during a crisis? What happens if communications are disrupted? What happens if the militia refuses an order? What happens if several factions compete for control? The more independent the local force becomes, the less control Iran possesses. The more Iranian control is required, the larger the buzz. Iranian presence and communications signature becomes. Tehran must balance deniability against reliability. A weapon fully controlled by Iraqis provides deniability but creates risk. A weapon controlled directly by IRGC officers provides reliability but weakens deniability. This is why the underground. The humans operating it must eventually surface. Supply chains create another vulnerability. Missiles require more than caves, replacement batteries, electronic components, fuel, lubricants, test equipment, specialized tools, transport vehicles, tires, medical support, food, water, generators, cooling, communications, security forces. Every requirement creates a transaction or movement, a network that never receives. Supplies is not a military base. It is an abandoned tunnel. Western and regional intelligence services would therefore examine commercial activity around suspected locations. Which company purchased excavation equipment? Who imported specialized ventilation systems? Why is a militia-linked contractor buying heavy blast doors? Why are electrical generators moving toward a remote valley? Why are Iranian engineers repeatedly crossing the border? Why has a new restricted area appeared near an old quarry? The decisive evidence may come from invoices rather than satellites. Iran could respond by blending military logistics into civilian commerce. Construction materials are common, generators are common, mining equipment is common, heavy trucks are common. Northern Iraq contains oil, gas, road, water, and infrastructure projects that legitimately require excavation. The surveillance problem becomes one of context. A tunnel is not automatically a missile depot. A convoy is not automatically carrying missiles. Intelligence agencies must avoid seeing a military explanation for every unusual activity. This uncertainty protects Iran. It also protects innocent activity from immediate attack. The danger arrives when political leaders demand certainty that intelligence cannot provide. Waiting for complete proof may allow the system to become operational. Acting on incomplete evidence may strike the wrong place and ignite a wider war. That decision becomes even harder when the facility is buried near civilians. Military planners may know a tunnel exists without knowing which chamber contains weapons. A strike on the entrance could damage nearby homes. A secondary explosion could prove the presence of munitions only after the attack. If no explosion occurs, Iran and the militia can present the site as civilian. The information war begins immediately. One side releases satellite imagery. The other shows injured families. Iraq condemns foreign aggression. The truth remains underground. This may be the greatest strategic value of subterranean deployment. It transforms physical uncertainty into political uncertainty. The enemy cannot easily demonstrate what it destroyed. Iran can claim the missiles survived. The attacker can claim the facility was neutralized. Militias can move surviving equipment elsewhere. Deterrence becomes a contest of competing stories. Would Iraq actually provide Iran meaningful strategic depth? The answer depends on what Iran wants to preserve. Iraq cannot make Iranian assets invulnerable. American, Israeli, Gulf, Iraqi, and Kurdish intelligence capabilities operate across the region. Airspace can be penetrated, facilities can be struck, convoys can be followed, militia networks can be infiltrated, but Iraq can increase the cost of finding and attacking every asset. It creates more geography, more legal constraints, more political actors, more possible hiding places, more launch directions, more targets than the attacker can address at once. Strategic depth is not immunity, it is additional time, space, and complexity. That complexity could be decisive during a short conflict. Imagine Iran's known domestic launch sites are being attacked, tunnel entrances are cratered, missile units are moving constantly, air defense systems are overwhelmed, commanders begin rationing launchers. Then a separate force inside Iraq activates. Drones emerge from converted trucks, short-range ballistic missiles leave underground storage. Cruise missiles launch from temporary positions. The weapons approach from the west rather than the east. Regional radars must recalculate. Aircraft are redirected. Interceptors protecting Israel, Jordan, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and American bases face additional demands. The Iraqi force does not need to deliver a decisive blow. It needs to complicate the enemy's defense while Iran preserves its remaining national arsenal. This is the logic of a distributed missile network. Every node may be limited. Together, the nodes produce strategic pressure, but the same scenario could destroy Iran's influence in Iraq. A major attack launched from Iraqi soil could bring devastating retaliation. Iraqi civilians could be killed. Infrastructure could be damaged. The economy could suffer. Political parties previously aligned with Tehran might distance themselves. Religious authorities could condemn the militias. The federal government could move against unauthorized weapons. Kurdish leaders could expand intelligence cooperation with Iran's enemies. Iran might preserve several missiles while losing decades of political investment. Strategic depth can become strategic overreach. This is why Tehran would likely prefer ambiguity and gradual preparation over a visible occupation of Iraqi caves. A small depot is easier to deny than a missile city. Components are easier to explain than complete launchers. Local production is less visible than large cross-border convoys. Iraqi operators reduce the Iranian footprint. Civilian contractors disguise construction. The network can remain dormant. Its existence may be intended primarily to influence enemy planning. Deterrence. Iraqi militia base becomes a potential launch site. Iran gains strategic effect before proving that the network is real. This is why exaggerated stories can still serve Tehran. Reports of missiles inside unknown caves create uncertainty. Iran does not need to confirm them. A denial may be expected. Silence may be interpreted as evidence. Old footage from Iranian missile cities can be presented as a new Iraqi facility. A routine tunnel project can be described as military. The information environment fills the gaps left by secrecy. Analysts must resist both extremes. They should not dismiss the possibility because complete evidence is unavailable. They should not transform possibility into confirmed fact because the story fits Iran's known strategy. The evidence supports a narrower conclusion. Iran has built underground missile infrastructure. Iran has transferred missiles and missile knowledge to partners. Iran-backed factions possess significant arsenals inside Iraq. Iraqi territory has been used to threaten regional targets. The Zagros terrain contains caves and difficult mountain geography. Those facts make dispersed subterranean storage plausible. They do not prove a massive migration of Iran's strategic missile force into Iraq's deepest caves. Return to the convoy that entered the mountain before sunrise. Perhaps the covered transporter carried a missile. Perhaps it carried machinery. Perhaps the tunnel was an old quarry. Perhaps it leads to a newly reinforced chamber. Analysts may watch the entrance for weeks without seeing the cargo again. That absence creates two possibilities. The equipment never existed, or it is exactly where Iran wanted it to be. The enemy must plan for both. More satellites are tasked. Signals are collected. Local sources are questioned. Strike options are developed. Iraqi officials receive private warnings. Militia commanders deny everything. Iran continues building uncertainty without launching a single weapon. That may be the real purpose of the caves. Not to bypass every satellite. Not to make precision strikes impossible. Not to create an invulnerable fortress beneath another country. The objective is to ensure that no attacker can be certain it has found every launcher, every missile, every production line, or every reserve force. Iran's traditional deterrent has depended on surviving the first blow. An Iraqi underground network would extend that principle beyond Iran's geography. Mountains would shield the equipment. Militias would shield the relationship. Iraqi sovereignty would shield the location politically. Fragmented. Command would obscure responsibility, and the possibility of hidden launchers would force regional defenses to divide their attention. The resulting system would not be one missile city. It would be a strategic maze. Some chambers would contain weapons. Some would contain components. Some would be empty. Some would be decoys. Some would be known to Iraqi authorities. Others would belong to factions answering to different chains of command. The uncertainty would be deliberate, because a missile force does not need to remain completely invisible to survive. It needs to remain impossible to eliminate with confidence. That is the strategic depth Iran may be seeking, not simply deeper rock, more borders, more actors, more ambiguity, and more places from which retaliation could emerge after an enemy believes the threat has already been buried.